Sometimes all it takes is a look. That's all. A different look. A silence that lasts a little longer. A gesture that can't be explained. That's exactly how it all began. In that quiet house, where the days passed peacefully, and the Shih Tzu was just a loving and playful companion, something happened that no one could explain. At first, it was just a feeling. Then it became a nuisance. And finally, it turned into fear. His gaze changed. It was no longer that sweet, innocent, happy puppy look. Now there was something else. Something strange. As if he were trying to say something. As if he were trying to warn. He stared at her. Long. Without blinking. Without moving. Just staring. At first, she thought it was all in her head. A silly thought. The kind you quickly forget. But time passed, and the gaze remained. Steady. Unmoving. Scary. With each new day, that gaze seemed deeper. More direct. As if he were seeing something she couldn't. Something that was right there. Close by. But that only he could see. And every time she tried to ignore it, he came again. The look. The silence. The warning. That's when she realized it wasn't her imagination. And worst of all, the reason behind that look was far more frightening than anyone could have imagined. Would you dare to continue living in a house where even your dog acts as if something invisible is lurking? If you also feel that animals know more than they let on, get ready. This story will shake up everything you believe. Because maybe your pet is trying to tell you something, and you just haven't realized it yet. It was just another ordinary night. The television was on, the couch was the same as always, and the Shih Tzu was there, lying on the rug like he did every night. Everything seemed calm, normal. But suddenly the silence changed color. She felt a slight chill, as if the air around her had grown colder. She glanced to the side, distracted, and that was when she saw it. The Shih Tzu sat still, like a statue. He didn't blink, he didn't move. His eyes were fixed on her, so fixed they seemed to pierce her soul. It was a look that didn't say, "I want affection," or "I'm hungry." It was a look that asked, "Are you seeing what I'm seeing?" Instinctively, she called his name, twice, but nothing. He stood there, as if he wasn't listening, as if hypnotized by something only he could understand. Time seemed to stand still. She looked at him, he looked at her, but there was something else in that exchange. Something invisible, heavy, like a presence between them. She stood slowly, her heart racing. Each step toward the dog was like walking into a strange dream. When she got close, he finally blinked, once, and looked away. Then he walked calmly away, as if nothing had happened. But for her, everything had changed. That wasn't a normal reaction. He always jumped when he heard his name. He always wagged his tail. He always came running. This time, he stood still, cold, as if on alert. That night, she was slow to fall asleep. The image of that look stuck in her mind, like a photo we can't erase. It was the first sign. The first time she sensed something bigger was behind such a small behavior. And the scariest thing, that look would happen again. Many times, always the same way, always with the same feeling. Something is wrong here. In the following days, something even stranger began to happen. He, who always ran happily to the food bowl, now just looked at the food and walked away. At first, she thought he was sick. After all, every dog has its days. But it was his favorite treat, the one he practically begged for with his eyes shining. And yet, he turned his face away. Twice. On the second day, she changed his food. She thought it might be old. She bought a new one, the kind he loved most. She opened the package, put it in the bowl, and called to him in her usual sweet voice. And nothing. He approached slowly, sniffed, took a step back, and again, stood still. But what really caught our attention was the look. He was looking at her with the same eyes she had seen days ago, watchful, suspicious, and full of something she still couldn't understand. It was as if he wasn't afraid of food. But yes, oh, feet wings, in that place, in that moment. She moved the feeder to the living room where the sun was shining. At first, he followed, but just as he was about to eat, he froze. He sat down next to it, lowered his head, and just stared into space. That's when she realized it wasn't just a dog's whim. There was something behind it, something that was making him feel afraid, because he was hungry. She could see it in his eyes, but for some reason, he couldn't eat. And every time she tried to insist, he looked away, as if to say, "It's not safe, not now." That night, she lay in bed thinking about what could cause this. A smell, a memory, a trauma? But the truth is, there was no apparent reason. No strange sounds, no other animals nearby, only him. And that behavior that was starting to repeat itself. The Shih Tzu stopped eating. But what he was really rejecting seemed to be the environment itself. And the worst part? That was just the beginning. Every house has its quietest corners. That hallway that gets a little darker at night, that door we no longer notice if it's open or closed. But for him, there was one place he began to avoid at all costs: the hallway leading to the guest room. Before, it was common to see him wandering around there, sniffing the carpet, entering the room, and throwing himself onto the cushions. It was his favorite spot. Until one day, he just stopped. It was a subtle change at first. He'd be running through the house as usual, but when he approached the hallway, he'd freeze. He'd stop with his paws planted on the floor, stare toward the bedroom door, and then turn back. No sound, no growl. He'd just turn back, as if to say, "Not there." She noticed, but thought he might have been startled by some noise. Thunder, a shadow, something simple. But as the days passed, his refusal became more evident. It wasn't a passing fear, it was a decision. Shih Tzu, he chose to not pass by there. One afternoon, she took one of his little toys, his most cherished, and purposely placed it at the entrance to the hallway. She called his name, crouching down in an excited voice, but he stood on the other side, staring at the toy, and then averting his eyes to the darkness of the open door at the end. His expression was clear. He wanted to reach for the toy, but something about that direction felt wrong. She walked over, picked up the toy, and stood there, alone, right in front of the bedroom door. A heavy silence hung in the air. Without knowing why, she felt goosebumps crawl. She went back to him, gave him the toy back, and he took it as if it were a prize for not having entered that place. That night, she tried to look more closely. Was there a sound coming from there? An insect? An exposed wire? But no, everything was in order. Everything apparently normal. But the Shih Tzu remained firm in his decision. That corridor was no longer safe. And every time he passed by, he stopped for a second and gave that same look. The one that was no longer just a dog. It was from someone who felt something she couldn't see. That morning, the silence in the house was total. Everything was in place. No open windows, no strange winds, no sounds coming from the street. She was sleeping soundly when suddenly, the silence was broken by a loud, dry bark. The Shih Tzu's scream echoed through the house like an alarm going off out of nowhere. She woke with a start, bolting upright in bed, her heart pounding in her throat. She looked around, a bit lost, until she heard another bark, short, firm, and frighteningly directed. He ran to the living room, where he usually slept, and there he was, standing, his body rigid, focused, staring down the hallway. Yes, the same corridor which he had been avoiding for days, but this time there was no hesitation, had alert. He didn't move even when she got close. His eyes were glued to the darkness of the hallway. The hair on his back stood on end, as if some ancient instinct had awakened. And then, another bark. Low, more serious, almost like a warning. But who do I warn? She, without understanding, turned on the lights and walked into the hallway. He looked around every corner. No open windows, no shadows, no sounds. And yet I felt like I was invading a space. That it wasn't hers. When she returned to the living room, he was still there, now silent, but with a glazed look in his eyes. When she called his name, he finally looked at her, and what he saw in her eyes, it wasn't fear. It was a kind of silent courage, as if he were protecting, as if to say, I saw it, I felt it, but you don't have to. That morning, she couldn't sleep anymore. He was thinking, what could make a dog bark like that? He was never the type to bark for no reason. He was calm, almost always too tame. But that night, something made him react. And the most disturbing thing, it wasn't the barking. It was the certainty she felt inside her chest. He didn't bark for nothing. He saw something. And the worst part, he was protecting her. It was an afternoon like any other. The sun streamed softly through the windows. The television played in the background, and she took advantage of this rare moment of silence to read a book on the sofa. Her Shih Tzu lay beside her, calm, his eyes almost closed. Everything seemed peaceful, until suddenly he raised his head, slowly, with eyes fixed on some point in nowhere. She noticed the movement and thought he had heard some noise from the street, maybe a passing motorcycle or a bird. But as he stood up, something caught her attention. His ears were flat, his body tense, and his eyes were moving as if following someone walking around the room. But the room was empty. Totally. She stopped reading. She watched silently. He began to walk very slowly, his paws dragging on the carpet, his gaze following an invisible path, from the corner of the room to the hallway, the same hallway he had stopped walking down. But now, it was different. He wasn't going ahead. He was following. Her breathing quickened. She knew no one else was there. They were alone in the house. And yet his behavior was clear. Something caught his attention. Something moved. Something he could sense. And no. When he reached the edge of the hallway, he stopped. He sat down. He just watched. And then, out of nowhere, he turned his face towards her. But that wasn't a normal look. It was as if he were saying, "Did you see it too?" She didn't know whether to freeze or get up. Part of her wanted to run to him, hug him, pull him back from there. Another part wanted to leave the house. At that moment, something became clear. It was no longer just a feeling. Shih Tzu was reacting to something. And the most terrifying thing, what he seemed to follow, had movements, as if it were vivo, as if walking around the house, as if he knew exactly where they were. During the day, he even looked the same. I'd play a little, accept affection, and lie in the sun with my usual calm demeanor. Sometimes I'd even grab my favorite toy and run around the rug like before. But as the sun began to set, everything changed. And she realized this clearly after observing for a few days. The transformation always began in the late afternoon. When the sky began to turn, Orange the Shih Tzu would change. Not physically, but in his gaze. His eyes became wider, more attentive, as if listening to something that hadn't arrived yet, as if they were waiting. At first, she thought it was a coincidence, that maybe the dog was just tired. But then she began to notice a pattern. As the sun disappeared below the horizon, his gaze took on a new expression, alert. It was as if he felt that the night brought something that the day hid. One day, she approached him as it was, getting dark, and called out to him. The Shih Tzu didn't respond. He was staring down the hallway, again. Only this time, unlike the others, there was a mix of tension and familiarity, as if I already knew that it would come back. She sat beside him, caressed him, and that's when she realized his body was cold, and he was trembling, slightly. It wasn't cold. It wasn't a fever, era fear. And the strangest thing, all this behavior only happened after daylight faded. It was as if the darkness released some presence, some energy, something the Shih Tzu already knew, and that she couldn't see. Every evening, his gaze was a silent warning, a preparation for something that came when everyone was asleep, as if the dog were, in its own way, a sentinel, attentive, faithful, ready to protect her from something she didn't even know was there. That night, she had trouble closing her eyes, because now, more than ever, I felt that the danger was not part of the imagination. It was real, and it appeared when night fell. Until that day, everything could still be explained as coincidence. Maybe the dog was going through a strange phase, maybe she was imagining things. But everything changed when someone from the outside felt the same way she had been feeling, and didn't even know it. It was a typical Sunday. A childhood friend who hadn't visited in months decided to stop by for a quick coffee. They often texted, but it had been a while since they'd spoken in person. When the doorbell rang, she went to the door, her Shih Tzu right behind her. But this time, he didn't bark like he always did, didn't jump, he didn't wag his tail. He just stood there, watching the door with the same gaze as before. That look she already knew very well. As she opened the door and hugged her friend, something unexpected happened. The woman shivered. Literally. A visible chill ran through her body. "Wow, what a strange feeling," he said, laughing, but with wide eyes. "It feels like I've entered a place that, I don't know, has pushed me away." The lady of the house froze for a second. She swallowed hard. He didn't say anything, just watched. They entered the living room, sat on the sofa, and began to talk. But the Shih Tzu didn't approach the visitor. Instead, he stood in the corner, watching, motionless. At one point, the friend asked, "Is he sick? He's acting strange." She hesitated, and then for the first time, she briefly recounted what was happening. The stairs, the fear of the hallway, the barking in the early morning. The friend became serious. "Look, I don't usually believe in these things, but ever since I came in here, I feel like there's someone else. Like something's hiding in this place, watching us. Seriously, I've never felt this way before." The room fell silent. The only sound was the ticking of the clock, and the Shih Tzu, still in the corner, watching, as if confirming everything. From that day on, she was sure it wasn't her imagination. If even those who had never set foot in that house felt the same presence, then something, in a suit, was there. And it wasn't just the Shih Tzu who felt it. Now, someone else felt it too. The day was peaceful, clear skies, pleasant temperatures, and the feeling for a few hours that perhaps everything was returning to normal. She even smiled when she saw the Shih Tzu pick up his favorite toy and wag his tail, just like old times. It was a small relief amidst so many strange days, but the peace was short-lived. Around 5 o'clock in the afternoon, as the sunlight began to change, she was organizing some books on the living room shelf. The Shih Tzu, previously calm, was lying near the hallway door. Suddenly, he raised his head sharply. He stood still for a few seconds, and then he growled, a low sound, coming from deep in the throat, a continuous, firm growl that didn't match the dog's docile temperament. She turned around immediately, startled, and saw him there, body tense, ears low, eyes fixed on the corner of the room, a completely empty corner. She approached slowly. "What is it, my love?" But he didn't even blink. He growled as if he were facing some threat, as if to say, "Don't come near here." Then she looked at the same corner and felt something strange, a weight, a kind of pressure in the air. There was no wind, no sound, no smell, but there was a sensation, as if that part of the house had changed temperature, as if someone were there, even if invisible. The Shih Tzu took a step forward, still growling, then one more, but it stopped, and it just stayed, as if marking its territory, as if to say, "If you want to get through here, you'll have to get through me." She knelt beside him, and for the first time felt real fear, because it wasn't just strange behavior. It was an act of protection. He wasn't scared for himself. He was defending her. Minutes later, he stopped growling and walked away. He returned to his corner and lay down, but his eyes remained open, vigilante, silent, attentive. And in that silence, she understood. Whatever was in that house, he felt it. And in some way she still couldn't explain, he was fighting it. It was by chance. That day, she was trying to distract herself. She'd been through a strange few weeks, full of unanswered questions, and decided to record a quick video of herself playing with her Shih Tzu, like she used to. He opened the camera on his cell phone, sat on the living room rug, and called out to him in an excited tone of voice. "Come here, my love, let's show everyone that you still know how to play." He came slowly, calmer than usual, but still wagging his tail. In the video, she laughs, throws the toy, and he catches it. But for a moment, he stops mid-stride. He stands still, with the toy in his mouth, staring at something behind her. The video continues. She laughs. She doesn't even notice. But he isn't playing anymore. It is alert. Later, when reviewing the video to post on social media, she noticed that odd moment. She paused. She repeated again. Why did he stop like that? That's when she decided to pay attention to the reflection in the glass of the closet behind her, a foggy mirror that took in part of the hallway. And then she saw something happened, very fast, a shadow, as if someone had crossed the hall, silently and without being there. She paused the image at exactly the right second, zoomed in. It wasn't dust. It wasn't a reflection of light. It was something dark, with shape, with movement. Behind her, his body froze instantly. My heart raced as if I had run a block. She stood there, staring at her phone as if it were about to tell her some truth she didn't want to hear. And for a second, he felt the same sensation as before, of not being alone. The video didn't lie. She was there, playing, and the Shih Tzu had already realized that something was behind her. Maybe that's why he stopped. Maybe that's why he had that frozen look. Maybe he was trying to warn. From that moment on, she began to understand that what was happening was no longer something subtle. It was real, recorded, visible, and the scariest thing, if that was accidentally captured on some random video, how many other times has this presence passed through her without her noticing? She always enjoyed being alone at home. The silence was comfortable, the corners felt cozy, and the Shih Tzu, with his constant presence, made everything feel light. But after everything that had been happening, even the silence seemed different. One afternoon, while washing dishes in the kitchen, he felt that shiver again, the kind that starts in your neck, runs down your back, and makes you stop breathing for a second. In the reflection of the window, she could see the Shih Tzu standing behind her, lying in the kitchen doorway. But that wasn't all. The feeling was different. He wasn't the only one looking. She turned slowly. Nothing. Only the Shih Tzu, standing still, with his eyes fixed on her. Again, that look that was already becoming familiar. But it wasn't just him. What she felt was all too clear. Had two looks at her. A visible one. Another, invisible. I started noticing this pattern at other times as well, while taking a shower and leaving the bathroom door ajar. As she sat down to watch something on TV, she felt something watching her from the dark hallway. As I tried to sleep, and the Shih Tzu remained awake, sitting at the foot of the bed, staring into the corner of the room. It was as if something besides the dog was there, silent, constant, watching. The feeling was so strong that some days she avoided looking back. She simply didn't want to see. I didn't know what I would see, and I didn't want to confirm what I already felt. And what made her most uneasy was realizing that the puppy I knew that too. It was as if he wasn't just a pet anymore. It was as if he had become a guardian, someone who was there for a reason, not just to keep her company, but to protect her from something. One night, while he was writing on his phone with the lights off, he felt as if someone was beside him, breathing. He looked quickly. Nothing. The Shih Tzu was far away, at the bedroom door, but the feeling continued. From that moment on, she slept with the lights on, because now the fear was no longer of the dark. It was what could to be in the dark, what she didn't see, but felt, and that somehow the Shih Tzu's gaze tried to warn every day. She no longer knew what to think. I was tired, confused, and at the same time afraid I was going crazy, because everything seemed to happen only to her and the Shih Tzu. But it was only when she talked to an outsider, someone who knew the place before her, that everything took on a new meaning, and nothing was the same again. The conversation happened by chance, at the gate of the house. The neighbor across the street, a quiet-looking gentleman who always greeted her kindly, stopped to play with the Shih Tzu, which was on her lap. That's when he commented, smiling, "Funny. The previous owners had a little dog like that too, but he was always scared. He never wanted to go into the back room." She froze. Back room? Yeah, that one at the end of the hall. They said it got stuck there. I never understood why. But then the girl started saying she heard footsteps at night, and before long, they moved. She was speechless. My heart was beating so hard that it felt like the sounds around me had disappeared. Footsteps at night? The same room? The same behavior? The neighbor continued as if telling a story. They said a lady lived there before them, alone, very reclusive. No one really knows how she died, but it was there, in that room. He shrugged, smiled, and said goodbye with a "good afternoon," but she didn't answer. I couldn't. At that moment, everything made sense. The dog's refusal to enter the hallway, the barking in the early morning, the fixed gazes, the feeling of presence, the reflection in the video. A sombra no canto da sala. All. Everything was connected to a past she couldn't even imagine. When he walked back into the house, the air felt heavier. The silence was no longer silence. It was waiting. And the Shih Tzu looked at her like he always did. Only now, she understood. That look wasn't a request for affection. It was a notice. A constant sign that there was something there. And that, from the beginning, he tried to protect her. I was trying to say, "You are not alone. You never were." After all, she began to see the Shih Tzu in a different light. He was still the same little companion as always, small, furry, with that affectionate way and sweet face. But now there was something more about him, something that could not be explained logically. It was as if he had a mission. His looks, which had previously seemed merely curious, were now understood as warnings. The way he stood in the bedroom doorway, still, motionless, wasn't just fear. It was surveillance. It was protection. She began to notice that on the quietest nights, when the feeling of being watched increased, he remained awake, sitting at attention, sometimes next to her, sometimes at the hallway door, but always between her and the void. There was one night in particular when she woke up scared, with her heart racing and the strange feeling that something had just happened. There was no sound. There was no wind, but he was there, standing, his body tense and his gaze fixed on the dark ceiling. She called to him softly. He didn't answer. He just slowly turned his face towards her, and in that instant, she knew. He wasn't afraid. He was protecting. That was the first time she felt anything other than dread, felt gratitude, because even without fully understanding what was happening, she was sure of one thing: I wasn't facing it alone. The Shih Tzu, small and silent, seemed to carry something that humans had forgotten, an ancient sensitivity, a kind of sixth sense that recognized what the eyes could not see. And if he was protecting her, then something much bigger was going on inside, something that perhaps even she wasn't ready to see. But at that moment, a new question began to echo within her. If he was so protective, what exactly did she need to be protected from? And the scariest thing, was it getting stronger? Because 3 nights later, while the Shih Tzu slept in the hallway, she heard a voice, low, slow, whispering your name, and it wasn't him. It was Dawn. Everything was silent. The kind of heavy, dense silence that seems to swallow even the most ordinary sounds. She slept curled up, her body facing the wall, under the dim light of a lamp beside the bed. The Shih Tzu, as he had been doing for the past few days, slept on the floor between the door and the bed, always alert, always between her and the rest of the house. The night wore on slowly. No noise, no movement, until something broke that silence. A voice, low, slow, almost whispered, but Clara, calling, your name. Well, she woke with a start. Her eyes flew open, her heart racing, her body on alert. He felt cold sweat run down the back of his neck. It wasn't a dream. She had heard. He turned slowly in bed. The room was the same. The lamp was still on. The closet was closed. The door was ajar. Well, once again, now a little closer. She sat down, trembling. The Shih Tzu was awake, standing in front of the door. His fur bristled, his nose pointed toward the dark hallway. He didn't growl, didn't bark, but he was shaking, as if he were feeling something much stronger than before. She held her breath, tried to rationalize. Maybe it was a noise from the street, a sound coming from a neighbor's TV, but it wasn't. That voice came from within, from the house, and the most disturbing, she recognized her. It was a familiar voice, but not from someone who was alive. It was as if a memory was trying to take shape, as if something from the past had crossed a threshold. She got out of bed slowly, her legs shaking, her eyes fixed on the Shih Tzu. He remained motionless like a statue, but his eyes were full of pain. It wasn't just fear anymore. It was suffering. It was as if he was trying to contain something that had finally entered. She took 2 steps closer to him and felt a cold wind touch her face. But all the windows were closed, and before I could say anything, the bedroom door closed by itself. It was there that she knew what was in the house. I no longer wanted to just be felt. Now I wanted to be seen, heard, and perhaps obeyed. And the Shih Tzu knew this all along.